Assalamu alaikum, you're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about the very important story, and that is about the killing of Emil Al-Zavari in Kabul. And this particular operation was conducted by the Americans. They used the Hellfire missiles which were launched from a drone, and eventually he was killed, interestingly, in the downtown of Kabul. Now, we always used to believe that most likely Al-Qaeda has been eliminated from Afghanistan. But when you talk about the number one leader, who was none other than Osama bin Laden, was also killed inside Pakistan. And there were reports that maybe he was living in Pakistan for quite some time, though he used to commute from Afghanistan to Pakistan. And that was done exactly 11 years ago on the 2nd of May 2011. Now, number two, who eventually ended up becoming the main man for Al-Qaeda, who hails from Egypt, was in favor of the killing of Anwar Sadat, was a hardcore Muslim fanatic, eventually ended up in Afghanistan and was killed the day before yesterday. Now, most important part is that what is going to happen now? Were the Taliban on board? Was this particular strike already planned? If the strike was planned, what about the government of Pakistan? Were they also informed? Because when it comes to the 2nd May 2011 incident of Osama bin Laden, we got to know that we were not on board. Or there were mixed stories coming out, if you remember. But now we'll be talking about this particular story in detail. Before I introduce you to our panelists, our production team has prepared a report. Let's watch that first.
America's drone attack in the Afghanistan's capital, Kabul, in the realm of countering the terrorism has once again put a great question mark on the credibility of the Taliban-led government and their respective pledges, which they guaranteed to fulfill in the Doha Agreement 2020 regarding not allowing the Afghanistan's territory to be used by terrorist groups such as Al-Qaeda to threaten the security of other countries. These pledges paved the way for the withdrawal of US-led foreign forces from Afghanistan. In this regard, United States President Joe Biden, in a special televised address from outside the White House, said that the justice has been delivered and this terrorist leader is no more. On the other side, the Taliban confirmed the attack in Kabul and claimed it as a violation of international principles and the Doha Agreement. In another statement, the United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that Al-Zawari's presence in Kabul grossly violated the Doha Agreement and repeated assurances to the world that they would not allow Afghanistan territory to be used by the terrorists. Pakistan's stance in this regard was conveyed by the spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Office, Mr. Asim Iftikhar, in which he clarified the unwavering stance of Pakistan regarding complete intolerance towards terrorist entities. In his statement, he said that Pakistan condemns terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. He added that Pakistan's role and sacrifices in the fight against terrorism are well known, and said that they have seen the official statements by the United States and media reports regarding a counter-terrorism operation carried out by the United States in Afghanistan, and Pakistan stands by countering terrorism efforts in accordance with international law and relevant United Nations resolutions.
Now, to talk about this, we have with us in our studio, on my right is Yasir, Janjua, senior analyst. Yasir, pleasure to have you in the program, sir. Thank you very much for your time. And on Skype, we have with us Dr. Aqab Malik Saab, expert on foreign affairs and international relations. Thank you very much, Aqab, for your time. Pleasure to have you in the program. And from United States of America, we'll be talking to Anwar Iqbal Saab, who's a senior journalist based in USA, and he's going to join us in a little while. But let me start off from you, Yasir Janjua Saab. The main reason why the Americans invaded Afghanistan in 2001, if I'm not wrong, that was the 7th or 8th of October, when we heard that missiles have been fired. Now, interestingly, sir, Osama bin Laden was killed after 11 years, and then furthermore, after 22 years, Emil Al-Zavari was killed as well in a drone strike. That was a separate operation conducted. This was through a missile strike, the Hellfire, while he was standing on the balcony. And he has his family there, and he went to meet them. And interestingly now, it is also believed that he was under surveillance, he was under observation, and they have been monitoring him for quite some time. So the right time, right moment, right place, he was taken out. Repercussions, sir, the fallout factor. Your take.
Faisal, thank you very much. First and foremost, such operations do not happen overnight. So he was definitely under surveillance and under observation, because they killed him at 6 a.m. in the morning while he was standing on the balcony. How did somebody find out if he was on the balcony? And if he was, or somebody did report at that particular moment whether he was standing in the balcony. So from where did the missile come in? Either it was launched from within Afghanistan or some neighboring country or some distant country.
Biden says that
location.
without having a single boot on ground,
Right.
we have eliminated
So
him.
there has to be some forces or some collaboration between the. I want to assume this has not happened without the consent of the Taliban government, and I want to believe that. Why am I saying this? Is because Taliban are obviously against, or their enemy, known enemy is ISIS-KP, which is the enemy of Americans as well. So there is a common ground for both the US and the Taliban at the moment to root out the IS-KP. However, having said that, as you were saying in the intro as well, in the package that you showed, yes, if we go by the book, this is the violation of the Doha Agreement. But how do we know if this has been violated or not? How about if the Taliban were actually part of this? Because I just can't believe that without some local help or assistance or know-how or
This
knowledge,
was not possible.
This
without
wasn't
him.
possible. So there has to be something connecting, which maybe in some time it is leaked or we find out. But this just couldn't happen. Now, repercussions. Unfortunately, Americans have tried such things in the past as well. And the advisory, soon after this incident, the advisory that the American government, the State Department has given to their nationals is, do not travel to Afghanistan or do not travel to such places where there are risks, because they feel and they know that there might be a fallout. There might be a reaction. However, I personally feel at this particular moment, Al-Qaeda is quite splintered and franchised and not a coherent force as it used to be. Ayman al-Zavari was most of the time spending time in hibernation, and because the group had actually become, there were some splinter groups, and ISIS being one, ISIL being one, which is a shootout or offshoot of Al-Qaeda. So Al-Qaeda is not as strong as it used to be. So why then would the Americans need to create trouble for themselves by eliminating somebody, a 71-year-old man, whose group is no longer as effective
as it used to be.
as it used to be? So I find that this is going to have some repercussions. And this is happening at a time when globally there are things going on. You know, there's a continuous war going on in Europe, and then now there are tensions between China and America over Taiwan, and now you find, so once the Americans left the Afghan soil for good last year, they should have realized that, well, we should let the Afghans deal with their problems themselves. But they can't just think about completely relinquishing control of such an important area, and that's why you find they came back to Al-Zavari, maybe because quite rightly, some people say Joe Biden is not doing well at home, and he needs some optics to show to his people, because on foreign policy front and on domestic policy front, Joe Biden is considered the most weak US president in recent history. So maybe he's trying to get what the Barack Obama achieved by killing of Osama bin Laden, he's trying to replicate. But unfortunately, Osama bin Laden and Ayman al-Zavari, although he is Osama's successor, but he's not that towering figure as Osama was, despite the fact that he was one of the masterminds of 9/11. But now he is no longer relevant, or he was no longer that relevant as the group used to be, or Ayman al-Zavari himself used to be, because we have not seen in last many years something happening from Al-Qaeda side. It is because effective intelligence, good operations by the global coalition against terrorism. So, I mean, well, I am absolutely okay for the idea to eliminate somebody like him, which is perfectly right. But the timing and the way it has been done can actually bring a lot of trouble in the months and years to come, and we'll have to see. It also shows now. We'll have to wait and see who does Al-Qaeda nominate as his successor. So that will also indicate how much of importance Al-Qaeda has in the world politics today, because that's something. There are a couple of names being taken, and then there are other options, but we'll not talk about it then right now. The question is, this is something that has been orchestrated with the help of, this is my opinion, and I could be wrong, but I think the Taliban have something to do with it.
This regime was on board. So perhaps the meeting that took place between the senior leadership of the Taliban and the Americans, and then we got to know that a certain amount of money most likely will be released. The Afghan money.
There has been some give and take, you know. There has been some give and take.
So I believe that most likely, but they have also condemned the attack.
But on the face of it, what do you expect them to do? They have to condemn, because they have to. There is a domestic politics that they have to play with as well. They can't just sit there and say, "Well, we are happy about it."
Because it's been almost 1 year since the Taliban took charge of the Afghan government. So 15th of August, and this is
like
the
12
month
days
of August.
away.
Exactly, almost a year.
Yeah.
Now the point is, sir, that during this 1 year, since the regime wasn't recognized, the Americans were not at all ready to talk to them. They were not ready to release their funds, and perhaps they were under a lot of pressure. Do you believe, sir, that now, since this man has been taken out, one of the major adversaries of the Americans is no more? Do you think the cooperation between the Taliban and the American government, this is going to go forward now?
I don't think they will start cooperating on a level they cooperate with others. What they've come to realize is that Taliban is a reality now. So that's why you find that they are talking to them behind closed doors. But there will not be a greater degree of cooperation. And as I said in the previous statement, that taking away of Emil Al-Zavari is not going to be a CBM for the two countries. Yes, he's been taken away, but he was not a major irritant per se. Even when Taliban had taken power and Americans had gone away, as I said, and he was probably, to his bad luck, he got killed there. I think what the reports are saying, that he had come there to collect his family and move somewhere else. So he was actually looking to move out, because either the Taliban had tipped him off to go away, or he had found out that I'm going to get killed and Taliban is going to probably.
There's a double game being played.
Yeah.
All right. Now let me also bring in Dr. Aqab Malik now. Dr. Saab, one important factor, since now one of the major adversary of Pakistan, and that is none other than Mullah Fazlullah, the head of the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, who lives in Afghanistan in the bordering neighboring area. The Americans, if they were so interested to keep Pakistan on board and to look after their concerns, the legitimate concerns I'm talking about, don't you think if they had an eye on Al-Zavari, what about Mullah Fazlullah?
Well, I don't doubt that. They probably do have an eye on him, but you've got to appreciate that the two people are very different. Fazlullah is based most likely in the eastern provinces of Afghanistan, which are quite mountainous and very difficult terrain. The Americans had many problems there before. Prior to leaving, in fact, they had lots of issues there. So did the Afghan government at the time. So I think it's not certain that they would be able to do anything, or whether they did or not. And on top of that, they still want to maintain a certain degree in contact with the Taliban. Now, you've got to appreciate also that there's another dynamic in play now. The fact of the matter is that they do not need Pakistan in the way they needed Pakistan previously. And as a result, the situation has changed drastically. They may well want to keep people like this around to form an irritant to Pakistan as and when it suits them. I mean, the fact is, this is how, unfortunately, the game is played. Pakistan's played the game many times. So has Taliban, and the Americans are not new to this. All over the world, you don't maintain virtual global hegemony without understanding the realities on the ground, and in conjunction with the global realities and how it might affect other nations. So I think it's very important to appreciate that. But there's no certainty. Again, And there's no definitive answer to this, because you can't blame or you can't allege something without evidence. And there is no evidence to this extent. We do know there is evidence that the United States did attack Al-Zavari, and they did kill him. And that's evident because that's broadcast throughout the news, and that was declared by the United States. However, on this front, it's not. And I think it's important to realize that even Pakistan, if they were willing to, could take him out, I think. I think Pakistan has more ability to deal with Faisal than the Americans have in this respect. Now that the Taliban are in charge, American boots on the ground are virtually going to be impossible without acquiescence of the Taliban. And they're not going to allow that to occur. I don't think so. As far as Al-Qaeda is concerned, let's look at it this way. For 20 years, more than 20 years, 25, 26, since it came into power in Afghanistan, and before that even, Taliban has been in touch with Al-Qaeda. And before that, during the Afghan jihad against the Soviet Union, bin Laden was an intrinsic part of the Mujahideen and the movement to oust the Soviet Union, with the acquiescence of the CIA at the time. So it's a big jumble and gray area. And if you try to want to get a definitive answer, it's not going to happen anyway. Nobody's going to admit anything, I don't think. The intelligence community is adept at this, and they would rather keep the cards close to themselves and require to use them when they want, when it's their advantage. And it's a big advantage to use this particular card if they know something about it, when there's a need to use it. At this moment in time, I think Pakistan is going through turmoil economically. As to what the cause of that is, whether it's just internal issues or external involvement from other parties, is another question, because there is no evidence of this. And I think we need to play on the evidence that we have. And as a journalist, you know, you can't broadcast conspiracy theories, because that would undermine your credibility as well. So I think it's important to realize when we have sufficient evidence that we can allow ourselves to indicate what it is, and we need to provide proof of that. But as far as this is concerned, I think I'd be talking in a dark area if I was to indicate that the Americans did know, because we don't know. And whether Pakistan knows why they're not doing anything about it, because we don't know. There's a fine line between the dynamics of conflict in Pakistan and Afghanistan right now. It's especially in Pakistan, because I think the Americans also do not want Pakistan to ignite further than it is now, because economically it's in turmoil. Over the last month, only a month, the Pakistani rupee has gone down 20% virtually. I mean, this is unbelievable. So to ignite some other issues in the country would just be tantamount to causing a virtual coup in the country. You're going to invite forces into the country in Pakistan that you do not want. You don't want. The Americans never really have wanted that much instability in Pakistan, because it's detrimental to themselves and their interests further afield in India, in the Middle East, in Afghanistan and Central Asia. Pakistan is intrinsic to this. Nobody wants instability in Pakistan. And as a result, I don't think the Americans are going to play any card like this whatsoever. I think they're going to keep it to themselves if they have it. And so too for Pakistan. I don't think Pakistan's in the interest of Pakistan to kill Faisal primarily because that would cause an uprise of guerrilla attacks and terrorist attacks in Pakistan at a point where it's very vulnerable at this point in time. So as a transition is occurring, the worst thing you can do is to knock it over the edge. I don't think anybody wants to do that. And it's a fine line. I think politics being played at this moment in time is very not black and white, very grey, and it's cloudy and murky, and nobody wants to upset the moment at this point in time. So I think it's blowing in the wind, really, when you say that Americans know, or the Pakistanis know, or the Afghanis know, and everybody should do something. That's not how you play politics. That's not how you do strategy. Strategy is very definitive in this respect, and that's not the way to do it.
Now, interestingly, this man had a bounty of $25 million. I mean, that's not a joke. Man hailed from Egypt, was a doctor, was a surgeon, interestingly.
He was Osama bin Laden's surgeon.
Yeah. Now, just imagine that this man converted into an extremist and eventually ended up doing whatever we have heard. Now, we've also been joined in by Anwar Iqbal Saab, senior journalist, joining us from United States of America. Assalamu alaikum ji. Anwar Iqbal Saab, assalamu alaikum.
Ji, walaikum assalam.
Good to have you in the program, sir. Thank you very much for your time. Now, sir, the government of Pakistan has also condemned terrorism in all forms and manifestations. They also said that Pakistan has sacrificed a lot and all these sacrifices are well known to the entire globe. Now, sir, killing of Al-Zavari in Afghanistan, interestingly, the man was being tracked for quite some time. This is what we learned from Mr. Joe Biden, the US president. So tell us about the news, the way they have been received in America, in the public in general, sir, and about the media. Anwar Saab?
Well, it has been seen as a positive news here. They're happy that they got rid of another person who planned the 9/11 attacks, and they obviously wanted Washington to kill all those who were involved in it. This is the general national sentiment in this country. They see them as America's enemies, and he was have been listed as America's enemy number one for years, decades actually. So people are generally they see this as a positive news, but there is not much excitement because now more than 20 years have passed since 9/11. So and I think Biden will get some political mileage out of it, but not much.
Now, Anwar Iqbal Saab, we all know that year 2011 was a year when the differences were very obvious between the United States of America and the Pakistani government. I remember it was the time when Pakistan People's Party was looking after the affairs in Pakistan. Three major incidents happened, sir. One was about the killing of Osama bin Laden and the way it has been reported and the way it has been projected through documentaries and Hollywood movies. Second was about the Raymond Davis case, sir. We all know what happened, how it happened, and how you went away. Mr. John Kerry had to come to Pakistan to rescue him. The third and the most important factor, again, was the Salalah incident, in which about 27, 28 precious lives were lost, all in 1 year. And then Pakistan had to practically stop the supply of NATO. And I remember Hillary Clinton, who eventually became the Secretary of State over there, she never said sorry to us. Never was the case when she condemned. We will look into it. This is how it was told to us. Now, sir, don't you think this is the time that, if America really wants to improve the relationship between these two countries, they should also look after the affairs and the, as I said, legitimate concerns of Pakistan, whether in the form of Mullah Fazlullah or the most wanted residing in Afghanistan and planning against the stability of our country. Now, tell us, sir, do you think that if Joe Biden takes a step forward, this could be something that is really going to cement the relationship between Pakistan and United States of America? Anwar Saab.
First of all, I don't understand what America can do now about those hiding in Afghanistan. America has no troops in Afghanistan, no influence on Afghanistan. America is out of Afghanistan, so I don't think that America can really help us physically inside Afghanistan in finding the Taliban Pakistan people. The only help we now need and we probably can get from America is some support for our economy. I think America see again. I don't know why we do that. We sort of go back and forth about as if this was a personal friendship between America and Pakistan. It was a childhood friend who betrayed us. There is never a friendship between two nations. But always a exchange of interest. When your interest and their interest match, you become friends. And there is a clash of interest, you drift away. There was a time when China and India were very close. And then, they had a clash over some areas and they became sworn enemies. You see how their relations are now. There is a lot of common interest between China and Pakistan, and that's why Pakistan and China are friends. So now with America, American policy has changed a little bit, or rather a lot, about our region. Now they see China as enemy number one, and they also understand that Pakistan has its own compulsion, that Pakistan is not going to play the role against China that it did against the Russians in Afghanistan. Pakistan will not get involved to the extent they would like Pakistan to get involved in their conflict with China. And therefore, now Pakistan is not in the first year of American friends. It is still a friendly country. America would still like to have good relations with Pakistan, and I think Americans are helping us with the IMF. Americans are helping us in getting even money from the Saudis. I mean, to us, it feels like the Saudis are our all-weather friend, and they are giving us money and everything. But even the Saudis do not are not willing to give you financial support without the IMF and the World Bank bank endorsement. And Americans are helping us there. They do not want Pakistan to sink, or do not want Pakistan to become a failure. But they will support us there, but only to a certain extent.
Now, one quick comment, sir, and that is about the State Department statement. They said that they warned the US citizens overseas that there is a higher potential of anti-American violence following the killing, and that Al-Qaeda supporters may seek to attack US facilities, personnel or citizens. Now, I also heard Mr. Joe Biden saying that, you never know that there could be another plan in making, just like 9/11. Your take? You think the Al-Qaeda setup has that kind of strength that they can plan something of that sort?
Well, Al-Qaeda is a mystery. It remains a mystery. I mean, it has been weakened, no doubt. Its top leadership has been eliminated. But you see, we have seen from our own experiences the political movements or even ideological movement like that. And I kind of does believe in an ideology. No matter how distorted that ideology is, no matter what they want is actually very, very negative. They want destruction, they want violence in the world. But at the same time, it is still whatever they believe in, but it is still a committed group of people. And therefore, I think all you need is just a bunch of people to do something as big as 9/11, So, I mean, I do not doubt the American fear. Lost their game. They don't think that an Al-Qaeda attack is actually going to happen, but they do fear, and therefore they keep their public informed. And there's another thing that we need to understand about these warnings. See, when you come to America, they make you fill out forms that say that you have not been involved in drugs, that you have not been associated with terrorist organizations, blah, blah. And somebody was asking me the other day, why do they ask these questions? I mean, who would say that he was involved in drugs or he's working for a terrorist organization even if he was? I said, well, that is not the purpose. The purpose is they want you to write it down on a piece of paper so that tomorrow, if they want to deport you, they have, instead of starting the entire deportation process, because that takes time, they will use a simple method that you lied on your papers while applying for a U.S. visa, and therefore we are deporting you. Similarly, in issues like that, there are American laws that require the government to keep their public informed and warn their public while they take decisions of visiting a certain place and things. So they actually also fulfill their legal requirements when they issue these kind of warnings.
All right, thank you very much, Anwar Balsa, for your comments. Coming to you, Janjua Sahab, now.
Thank you.
One important factor that we have learned, that Mr. John Kirby, he in fact said that now, since we do not have any DNA confirmation, but most likely according to the local sources, we can confirm that this is what has happened. Well, there was another woman, she in fact also gave an interview to one of the leading television channels. She said that, it could have been a bomb, it could have been a rocket, God knows, but I took my kids out, and perhaps Zavari also knew, as you rightly mentioned, that there could be a drone strike on him, or he could be eliminated. So what is the guarantee that this man has actually been killed?
See, that guarantee, as Dr. Aqab Malik was also saying, this is a gray area, because when Osama bin Laden was eliminated, despite world pressure, they did not release even the images of the body.
Yeah.
And they dumped him in the ocean. No DNA testing was done. Even if it was done, only 25 years later we'll find out. So in this particular case as well, I want to believe this was Emil Al-Zavari. However, even if they will do some DNA testing, how can the first and foremost, if the Americans have no boots on the ground, who's going to recover the body? Do you think Taliban are going to hand over the body to him, to the Americans? No, they're not going to. So it's most unlikely. Yes, if the Taliban do the autopsy and DNA testing and they release the information, that's a separate story. The Americans, and maybe the truth will come out if he wasn't the one. However, I just want to believe that such a precision attack cannot be on basis of false information, especially when they are not.
If you remember, they also had a strike right out before they were leaving. Remember?
Yeah.
And they ended up killing civilian families.
However, I mean, as I said, this is a gray area. We will not know unless the Taliban come forward and say, look, we have done the autopsy and we have done the DNA testing, and here are the facts. He was Emil Al-Zavari. That will prove. Now, whether it remains to be seen whether they will actually accept it, because in accepting there are two things, you know, that their sovereignty has been infringed, and that's what they wanted all along, that the Americans should leave. And now, in their presence, Americans come back and kill Emil Al-Zavari, so they can lose that popularity, that wave that they have domestically. What were you guys doing if the Americans still have to come back and do it? So why have you come into power? Having said that, you know, I mean, I feel that it didn't happen overnight. So they had some information on him. They had some information on him, and that's why
they say that since the start of the year 2022.
By the way,
this man was under surveillance.
He was under surveillance, and for last 1 week, President Joe Biden was discussing with his cabinet members, so to the extent that they had made a mock-up of the entire area surrounding his house, and that was made to be placed inside the White House briefing room, and President was made to be was briefed on how it's going to happen. And by the way, the British embassy is only 1,000 feet away, so they had to be very careful. They didn't want to make those mistakes they had done in the past.
Friendly fire.
Friendly fire or collateral damage. So they didn't want to do that as well. So it was a very precise action. I mean, until today, we don't know if there have been more casualties because of that attack in buildings next to the house, you know. We don't know yet. So apparently there are none. So that's why I think I want to believe, but no one knows, to be honest. We don't know yet. Maybe the Taliban released the information. On this, I have just one comment to make. There's very important incident. We were talking about friends and blah, blah, blah. Only yesterday, do you know there's a Khanna amendment that has been passed in the US Congress? So now the thing is, Pakistan does not fit in. We were talking, one of the participants was saying, Pakistan does not fit in the American scheme of things. Khanna amendment clearly says that the Indians are allowed, they will have a waiver to buy Russian products.
Yes.
Russian weaponry.
Yes.
Pakistan is not getting something like that. And
so
we all
they have
know
passed a certain bill, and you know they said that, well, these do not apply on India.
Yeah.
Perhaps for the rest of the world, but Indians are their blue-eyed boys now. So that is perhaps one of the major reasons. Now coming to you, Dr. Aqab Malik, according to a report that was issued by none other than the United Nations Security Council, and they said that the IS and the Al-Qaeda, they are both gaining strength in Afghanistan. I want your comment on this particular statement.
I think when it comes to the United Nations, they have more credibility on the ground as far as understanding of what's going on. But you've got to appreciate that much of the United Nations is not funded for intelligence gathering per se, but it's more knowledge that they acquire by being on the ground, by their own work. They do have their own intelligence assets to some extent, but they're not funded in the same way. So they have to negotiate with the Taliban and how they act and behave in Afghanistan. The last thing they want is to upset the Taliban, because then that would affect the humanitarian process and activities for the general population, and that's the last thing that they want. But having said that, they're a credible source of information. Now, if the US says so, then you would think that there could be propaganda value to this, etc., etc. However, when you have assets on the ground that are working for humanitarian needs, and they indicate what's going on because it's in the interest of the humanitarian process that they have, there has to be taken with some form of validity here. So at the end of the day, I think maybe they are. The matter is, when the US was in Afghanistan, they were putting pressure on all the groups, essentially. And they had air superiority in that respect, that they could drone strike anybody they liked. And they were taking out many IS and Al-Qaeda whilst they were in Afghanistan. And that's not to say that they can't now, obviously, just what happened 2 days ago. But I would think that as far as IS is concerned, we talked about this before. When last year the Taliban took over, we indicated, and I think there was wide recognition that, and even within the IS, there was an announcement by the Middle Eastern the ISIS, that the general terms of events in Middle East are unfavorable for IS at this moment in time because of what's happening in Syria and Iraq, except for Yemen maybe. But Afghanistan is a new front. So they were already pushing assets into Afghanistan. And the borders are so porous, it's very easy to get people in and out of the country. And Taliban are not in control of the country the way a normal government is. They're learning to understand to get into power and can take control of things, but they don't have the same assets and manpower and technological know-how and how to control the border areas. It's surrounded by many countries, and the border is very porous, as I mentioned. So I don't deny that. And I bet the next question you could ask is, are the Taliban acquiescing to this? I mean, I don't think they're acquiescing to ISIS because it's a natural strategic competitor to the Taliban in Afghanistan.
Because in this report, they've also mentioned that the most important members of IS and Al-Qaeda are still present in Afghanistan. This is their observation. And they said that these are the thriving networks.
Al-Qaeda was in Afghanistan. So what does that tell you? There are obviously other members of the groups there and leadership in certain aspects. But they're continuing what they call their form of jihad. For Al-Qaeda, it's slightly different for Al-Qaeda as it is to ISIS, because ISIS is an opponent of Taliban, whilst Al-Qaeda was...
Taliban do not have any plan beyond the borders of Afghanistan, whereas they want a proper Khilafat system.
Well, their interpretation of Khilafat is very different from what the general population of the world is. Their interpretation is very narrow in that respect, and they want a very defined 1400 years ago without understanding the improvements of humanity and other aspects that development have taken place throughout 1400 years, that they don't want to take that into account. And that just doesn't understand reality as it is in the world. To push people back in general technological, philosophical, social, economic know-how, are you going to divorce it from the modern world as it is? You cannot. So I think there has to be a degree of adaptation to modern reality if they're going to be successful. And this is why, in essence, they're not so successful. So they need to learn these things. That's why they're termed as extremists, because they're not willing to appreciate and understand the way the global governance structure is developed, and they want to change it all. And it's only a small number of people. This is why they're termed as extremists. And that's where the word comes from. They're way off one side of their own form of reality, and it doesn't abide by where the rest of the world is going. And that's why they'll never have support from the rest of the world. It just won't happen. The rest of the world wants to exist in a different reality. So they're not willing to understand that. And that's why they're being cautioned off, and they're being marginalized. And the major countries are opposed to them. China is opposed to it. The current hegemon is opposed to it. Russia is opposed to it because they've got their own issues with Islamic movements in Central Asia, for example, and the impacts that may have in Chechnya and the Caucasus and other aspects of Russian, because there's a lot of dynamics involved in Ukraine and the Crimea, because it was predominantly, before they were pushed away, predominantly Muslim until Stalin came. So there are a lot of other things that are involved here. And when we talk about these ideas in a simplistic black and white term, it doesn't work. Al-Qaeda did have some lever, but they became extremists because they attacked the governing hegemon in the world. And they were so small. It was just a pinpoint attack. But they had no alternative. What are they going to provide? They're not going to provide any alternative governance structure anywhere in the world. Taliban was different, the Afghan Taliban, because they set up a government and only within Afghanistan. And as far as Taliban itself as an organization, forget about the other groups that they're associated with. They just wanted to concentrate on Afghanistan and still do. And they want to be part of the global governance structure. But they have to compromise in many ways, which they don't seem to appreciate yet.
Yeah, thank you very much,
That's
Aqab,
good.
Malik, for your comments. And I would also like to thank Anwar Iqbal Saab and Janjua Saab. It was a pleasure having you. And interestingly, the same report also suggests that perhaps all these groups, Al-Qaeda and IS, pose varying level of threats to various countries, or rather, let me put it this way, to international peace. And they said that IS Khorasan, the group's Afghan-based chapter, is being seen as a bigger threat in the short and medium term, whereas Al-Qaeda is a much bigger threat in the long run. So let's see what happens now, but as long as we know, and what the Americans have in fact mentioned, that Mr. Zavari is no more. He has been eliminated in a drone strike, and let's assume if it is true, time will tell how things unfold. But anyway, I'll see you tomorrow at 8 or 5 p.m. Till then, you take good care of yourself. Khuda Hafiz.